does for my campaign because I would not be here without her. Riyad Cooper is a friend of mine who I met a couple weeks ago at a Zoom meeting. We're going to start by talking about rules of deadly force in the military and how they are so much more strict than they are for civilian police. Riyad, my friend, take it away.
Okay, how you guys doing, everybody? My name is Riyad Cooper. I met up with Ryan Johnson through one of these exact Zoom meetings. We started talking. He likes to talk. I like to talk. We learned how to take turns talking. It was pretty good. We had fun, talked for about an hour afterwards. He asked me to talk to you guys about deadly force in the military. I spent 6 years and some change in the Army, in the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment as a mechanic, and then I was also a crew chief in the Army. I was a 67 uniform, which later got changed to 15 uniform because they changed our job code. And I deployed to various combat zones in Iraq and Afghanistan and the Balkans, which doesn't really count as a combat zone because there was a McDonald's there, and the laws of capitalism says when a McDonald's shows up, you're not at war anymore. So I got to know our rules of engagement. First of all, because anybody in the Army who goes into a combat theater gets a brief. That's the first thing they do is they brief you before you go in. They give you a booklet of all the dangerous things that can kill you, and then they give you your rules of engagement. How does this relate to police accountability? Because we were talking about violence, police violence, and violence as it pertains to the government itself. When I say the government, I mean the police, the sheriff, any government entity that is licensed to use violence on a person to gain compliance. Ultimately, because in my mind, that's exactly what it is. Now, my thinking is just a skosh off of Ryan's when it comes to that, the way I think about that, because I think of it as violence to gain compliance with the police, or violence to gain compliance from citizens by an authorized government official. And that violence is used to bring that person to a court of law. So in the military, we have something simple, or something similar. In the military, we use violence to gain compliance from a group of people or government. The way we do that is through the various application of force. Now, we don't just willy-nilly shoot people. And this is the actual meat and potatoes of why we're here today, the rules of engagement. So, like I said, when you're deployed, you get a card. And then you sit down and you get a briefing. Everyone gets a briefing. Everybody they give a rifle to gets a briefing. If you get a rifle, a handgun, if you get the means to do violence, you get a briefing. The rules of engagement are pretty simple. They usually boil them down to, they call it breaking it down Barney style, or breaking it down to the lowest common denominator, or making it easy enough that a toddler can understand it. That's where you get all these great military sayings. And we had 4 or 5 basic rules. Know your target. You have to know what you're shooting at, period. You have to know what's around your target. You have to know and I'll make that clear in a second. You have to understand your situation, because if you're in the right point to use force, but you're in the wrong situation, it can cause a whole bunch of problems. And last but not least, you have to have enough discipline to fire when told. So I'll give you a scenario, because although it seems simple, it can get really complicated really quickly. Let's say you're at a bazaar, you're in a market, and somebody comes around the corner and they're a bad guy. You identify they're a bad guy. You see that they have a weapon. So you fulfilled step 1. You see them, you see they have a weapon. This person then begins to shoot. But then you realize this bazaar is crowded with people. So now you can't shoot into this bazaar crowded with people because there's people all around. So you have to know your target. You have to know your situation. There's hundreds of eyes on you. And you're in the colors of the United States. You're in our uniform with our flag on. So what does a soldier do in this situation? First thing a soldier does is they call back to command. They call back to the house and they ask for permission. They explain what's going on, or I guess nowadays they have video cameras of what's going on. When I was in, it was in 2000 to, I was in from 98 until 2004. So you had to call back, you had to describe the situation, you had to give them what was called a situational report. You had to explain to them what was going on, and then a commander made a decision whether or not you could fire. If you have a high enough grade officer with you, if you have like a field grade officer, or if you have like a major or a really high ranking captain, he could make the decision to fire, but then he is shouldering every inch of that responsibility to fire. And if something happens, like an innocent civilian gets killed, he's directly responsible for that. And so are you, actually. And it's even in the military, you are directly responsible for what your rifle hits. You're responsible for where your rifle is pointed. You're responsible for where your rounds go. You're responsible for what happens. Now, this is a situation that did happen. We had some customers from one of our task force. They had a cow get in the way of what they were doing, and so they shot the cow. The United States was responsible for that cow. They were responsible for the meat that it could have produced. They were responsible for all the byproducts it could have produced. They were responsible for everything that cow could do. But I'd get back to the market. But so to recap what I was saying, not only do you have to identify your target, you have to identify that they are in fact armed. You have to identify that not only are they armed, but are they a threat to you? And then after you identify that they are a threat to you, you have to identify the situation. Would it be better if you walked away, if you left that situation? Or if you took that, if you retreated? Because if you retreat and the enemy follows you and the battle goes elsewhere, then it's no longer in the market, less civilians are involved. That's an actual thing. People think America doesn't retreat in the face of combat, but they make intelligent decisions like that all the time. They clear streets. They wait to fire to clear streets. They shield civilians. They will hold their position and get shot at to clear a street of civilian targets before they return fire. It's really kind of amazing. They go out of their way to try to make sure they don't kill civilians. So how does this relate to cops? So in the military, they take painstaking measures to make sure that they try not to kill civilians, that they try to get the right targets, that they try to shoot the right people. A military commander is expected to hold his judgment until he's certain or positive. A soldier is expected to have enough discipline that they can hold their position under fire and, if need be, die to accomplish their mission. And if their mission is to safely return fire and eliminate the enemy without killing civilians, in the mind of a military person, that's an adequate trade. You are expected to stand and die if need be, to hold your position, to identify your targets, and to kill the right people. Because the military is violence, but it's applied violence in a disciplined manner in the correct place. And when you break that down and you come home and you break it down even further and you take it to its base level, a soldier's job is to accomplish the mission. A soldier's job is not to stay alive, which is shocking to a lot of people. But every soldier at their core, and most people in the military even understand this, your job is the mission. If your job is to bring somebody in to face justice, that's what you do. The only time you're allowed to deviate from the mission is if your mission becomes impossible and you have to eliminate your target. And that's still considered a mission failure. And they do what's called an after-action review, and the Army takes a genuine look at accountability. Like every time a rifle is fired, they do an after-action review, and the Army looks to who's accountable. Who's accountable, who fired what, why they fired, what the situation was, and what happened. That's the Army that I came from. That's the military that I came from. That's the high accountability standards. And you're held accountable under what's called UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It's not civilian law. It's way more stringent. And under UCMJ, you can face the consequences for not controlling where your rifle is or what your rifle is doing, or for shooting before you have permission to shoot, basically, before you've identified your target. That was our use of force rules in Afghanistan and Iraq. There are times when our use of force, we had a pretty clear blanket because we knew we were in enemy territory and people were shooting at us all around us, and it was pretty easy. There were times when we were doing delicate operations where you're doing an operation and somebody comes in and you don't know who that person is and you have to identify them. That's much harder. There have been, because of these rules, there have been mistakes in my regiment where they almost shot an interpreter, but because they had trigger discipline and they understood that they weren't to fire their rifle before they identified who the target was, that guy not only didn't get shot, he ended up getting picked up and taken home with us because he was one of our interpreters. A lot of lives end up getting saved like that. Mistakes end up getting made. And when mistakes are made, accountability is held. Does anybody have any questions for me?
I just have one quick question. I really appreciate the detail on this. I'm assuming we're going to go into differences between how the military handles this and how our local police forces handle this, because that's my question right now, is because I would think that local police forces should have the same amount of discipline and accountability, but apparently that is not the case. Am I correct about that?
Sir, so speaking as somebody from the military, I can tell you what I've seen cops can do versus what they're supposed to do is not the same thing. So
okay, so we're talking about a difference between what is on paper accountability and then what is in practice accountability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
On paper,
all right.
And I would, and Jason, I'll give my little speech too, but we'll compare. So Riyadh just named his rules as combat mechanic. I was a Navy auxiliary base security. So the civilian equivalent of that would be a reserve sheriff's officer. I will go into what I was taught, and we will compare those to the civilian rules after I tell you what I was taught too.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and rest assured, like I've been attacked so many times in Afghanistan. We've been attacked in Iraq. We've had all various sorts of run-ins. We had people making step charts of our post and all that. Your rules of engagement get tested. And the difference between coming home with a clear conscience and coming home with a dirty record is your discipline. It's your ability to think under that pressure, because it's a tremendous amount of pressure. For example, me personally, I got tasked with guarding, we call them host nation workers. What it is they bring people in from the local community, and then they come in and they do things like build roads and set up stuff. It's basically a gigantic jobs package in Afghanistan. Well, one of the guys that we were guarding, our unit was tasked to guard, he was making a step map. Basically, he was inside of our perimeter, and he was making a foot pace map of our base, like what buildings are where. And the reason he was doing that was so when they called down mortar fire the next day, they could fire accurate mortar rounds onto our base, and they could produce the most casualties. So I saw what he was doing. I said something to my boss. My boss went and got the commander of the MPs, and the MPs came over, and we all zip tied him, hands and feet, and then the MPs took him for processing, took him away and questioned him and interrogated him and pulled him off. Turns out this guy was a member of the Taliban. He had slipped in with the regular host nation people under some fake papers. He wasn't who he said he was, and he was there to basically cause maximum damage. So it's just one of those things where every soldier that's in that theater that was forward deployed, is what we call it, has a responsibility to basically know what's going on and have the discipline to resolve a situation with the least amount of bloodshed, basically. When you engage somebody, your first step is to restrain first, and then you escalate it from there. And military escalation can get pretty insane, and everybody's used to seeing like the videos of things blowing up and people, shooting off rounds like that. But that's the last step. The Army always tries the first step, which is to gain compliance without any of that. So, I mean, there's a clear escalation of force. Am I making sense?
To me, you are, because we had a very, very, very clear escalation of force rules as well. I'll get into those a little bit here in a second. Do you have anything else, or do you want me to take it, Riyadh?
Oh no, I'm good. I'll answer any questions anybody has. I've got several examples of things that happened while we were deployed that I'm pretty sure can illustrate the use of force rules and what people do and how they're supposed to do it.
Perfect. Okay. I'm gonna start with my experience. I was in the Navy from 1995 to 1999. I went in when I was 17. I was an aircraft mechanic. I was an AMH-2 when I got out. The Navy does things a lot different from the Army. A lot of things that are jobs in the Army, in the Air Force, are just extra things you have to do on top of your regular job in the Navy and Marine Corps. One of the jobs I had for a couple of years was I was a base auxiliary security officer, which, to put that in civilian equivalent terms, I would be a reserve sheriff's officer. We went through, I think, a 3-week school. I was 18 at the most when I did this. So 18 to 19, maybe 20. I think I did it from 96 to 98. So I took all of the required gun training to be a Navy military police officer and the deadly force training. And the school was taught by Marines. There were 2 things they instilled in us from the absolute get-go, before we even got to shooting. The first one was, you will miss. If you are in a stressed out situation where you are, where somebody's shooting at you and you're shooting back, you will miss. If you hit the wrong thing when you miss, you will go to prison. The second was, do not take that gun out and point it at anything unless you are 100% sure that deadly force is necessary. And we also had an escalation of force rules where the military did not want you taking your gun out unless it was absolutely necessary. There is a reason there are no shootings on military bases in America today. And the reason is the accountability is built in. They made it very clear that if you shot somebody, at the minimum, you were going before a shooting board that was going to Monday morning quarterback you in any way they wanted to. And you would most likely go to a court-martial. And a court-martial is above the UCMJ That's an actual federal criminal conviction. If you shot the wrong thing, they said there was no doubt about it, you would go to prison. And one of the things they said from the get-go, and this was 1996, so cell phones weren't invented yet, was, I thought he had a gun means you are going to spend a large part of your life in prison. Period. There was no gray area on that. The military, the Navy, the Marines did not want you shooting anything. And at the time, a lot of this training was direct transfer to the state patrol. So my pepper spray qualification, where I got pepper sprayed, which is a story worth telling after this, that got me a card. That card, had I gotten out and gone to work for the state patrol, would have meant that I would not have to be pepper sprayed again in the state patrol training. So a lot of this was above Washington police standards, and by doing this training in the Navy, had I gotten out and wanted to become a cop, I would have been able to bypass a lot of this training because I already had it in the military. So when it comes to the excuse that the civilian police use, I thought he had a gun. The reason that could not work in the military was because it violated the first rule of deadly force, which is know what you are shooting at, which is exactly what Riyadh said. What that meant was you had to know the target you were shooting at, what was behind it, what was around it, what you would hit, not if, but when you missed. And if you hit the wrong thing, you were going to prison. To put this in a similar situation, 4 or 5 months ago, there was a UPS truck hijacked in Florida. And the cops got in a chase with these guys. The cops end up cornering the UPS truck. They shot over 300 rounds at the UPS truck. They killed the UPS truck driver. They killed the guys who hijacked the truck. And they killed 2 innocent bystanders who were just caught in the crossfire in their own cars. This would have landed you in prison in the military. No doubt about that. That probably would have landed you in prison in a war zone in the military. As far as I know, that shooting was ruled justified. I don't know how much more I can expand on this outside of the gun was a last resort. The Navy did not put up with any complaints that they halfway justified against you. For the auxiliary people, we were off immediately. We did have another guy who you could tell loved being a base auxiliary officer more than anything. He got the power trip out of it. And I don't know if the Marines did this intentionally or not, but they made this guy a sort of a supervisor. And he just could not get enough of it. He could not get enough of the power trip. And I don't remember exactly what this guy did. I think he pepper sprayed someone he shouldn't have, which meant he violated the rules of force. That was it. He was out. There was no training. There was no coming back. I don't think he went to captain's mast over it. But there was no more. He was done. And it was immediate. It was 100%. There was no coming back. I want to compare the rules that I had in the Navy versus what we have seen so many times in the civilian world. When I say the rules in the Navy of I thought he had a gun meant you would end up in prison, all of us have heard the excuse of I thought he had a gun from many civilian police officers today. In many cases, people had a phone or a wallet or nothing. What that means is, and all of these shootings are rule justified. What that means is there is nothing any of us can do to prevent being shot by a police officer if they use the excuse, I thought he had a gun. Whereas the military would lock you up, the police will give you a vacation. The standards are completely different. The standards for police officers around the country are, I was afraid for my life. The question should be, why in the hell were you afraid for your life? And there is no reason that Riyadh in a combat zone or me on a military base should have far more strict rules than our civilian police officers do. And we can get into some of the changes that both Riyadh and I have discussed that we think should be made. But there is no doubt on this issue. The rules the military uses for deadly force, either for its own police officers, stateside or overseas, or the rules used in combat, are far more strict than what our civilian police use against us every single day. I yield the floor. Riyadh, where should we take this?
Hey, Ryan, let me interrupt real quick. We have a couple new friends to welcome. Michael Adams joined us.
Outstanding. Welcome, Michael.
And Josh Capasso.
I don't know who that is, but welcome.
And yeah, those are all the new ones.
Okay. And we've recorded this, everybody, so we can hopefully put this video up on my Facebook site. Riyadh, where would you like to take this?
So what I'd like to first do is I'd like to look at just one or two clear-cut issues where police overstep their authority that have been acknowledged by courts already. You take the Walter Scott case that happened in South Carolina, where the man was there. It was a traffic stop. The cop tried to pull the guy out of his car. Walter Scott then ran away from the cop. The cop dropped his taser. And Walter Scott runs across an empty field, and the cop pulled out his gun, shot him in the back. The police, their report said that he took the cop's taser and tried to use it on the cop, and then the cop shot him in self-defense because he was afraid that he was going to be killed by this guy. But then the police union came out and backed the cop. Nobody even questioned that this cop was lying. And then the video came out. The video was taken by a third-party person. The cop didn't even know that person was videotaping him off his back porch, and it clearly showed the exact opposite of what the cop said. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't trust police. I actually want to trust police. I mean, as a black man living in Arlington, Washington, which is clearly not a town with a lot of black people, I want the police to provide adequate, intelligent police protection. But what I do want the police to do is I need the police to be more accountable for their actions. This idea of immediate compliance, there's a whole police doctrine out there. Getting ready for this, I studied and I was reading and going over, trying to find as much police doctrine as I possibly could to be intelligent about this conversation. I ran across a doctrine, it's called immediate compliance. So because this guy, Walter Scott, did not provide immediate compliance, under this police doctrine, cops then had all due rights to shoot this guy. And they felt justified in basically executing this person. And there are a lot of cops that believe if they get anything other than immediate compliance, they have the right to either beat the crap out of you or shoot you. And this isn't new. This is not a new doctrine. This is not a new idea. These aren't new policing methods. These have been here for years, since before Rodney King, actually. The only difference now is police violence isn't being discovered, it's just being filmed. People are just pulling out their phones and using the ultimate weapon against police violence, which is a camera, because a camera is an unsympathetic witness. It doesn't lie. Now, they could try to gaslight you after the fact and tell you, well, that's not the whole thing, or try to come up with some excuse afterwards. But the truth is it's an unapologetic witness. And in Walter Scott, it was an unapologetic witness. The thing that sent that cop to jail in that situation is one of his partners was seen picking up the taser, walking it over to the body of the dead man and dropping it near the body of the dead man. The cop who did the shooting went to jail. The cop who framed that taser into that position, as far as I know, nothing happened to him. Now, let's take this and let's take two cops out of that situation, and let's say that me and Ryan had an argument and Ryan jumped out of his car. We got into a scuffle. He pulled my pepper spray away from me, tried to use it, couldn't do it, but ran away from me. I pulled my gun out. I shoot Ryan in the back 2-3 times. I say I did it out of self-defense. And then videotape emerges that not only did I shoot Ryan in the back as he was running away from me, but my wife then grabs the pepper spray and sets it down by Ryan. Not only am I going to jail, my wife is going to jail as an accessory to murder. Cops aren't treated like that. Police, not only do they not go to jail, it's very rare for them ever to go to jail. I want to say in the FBI's entire history, they shoot like 200 people a year, and they've never had one unjustified shooting. According to the FBI's own documentation, they've never had one unjustified shooting, not one. And they've had some pretty sketchy shootings. They've had somebody shot in an interrogation room while they were handcuffed to a table, but they've never had an unjustified shooting. And last I checked, the law doesn't afford cops extra rights because they're cops. I mean, the only thing they get, they get a lot of luxuries, but one of the few things they get is other cops are allowed to investigate them. That's number one. It doesn't matter if it's internal affairs or a different department, cops are allowed to investigate cops. And as long as you're in that fraternity, as long as you're in that brotherhood of police, there's always going to be a conflict of interest there in my mind, especially in the public's mind too. And I used to be considered extreme because I thought like that, but as these incidents continue to happen, they continue to mount up, it continues to be questionable, the level of force that they're bringing to just everyday affairs, it becomes more obvious that it's disproportionate and it hurts the situation more than it helps. There's another policing philosophy out there that basically says if somebody brings a 2, you bring a 10. If they bring a 10, you bring a fucking 10. Excuse my language, but that's the language that they use. That's this whole, it's a whole ethos that they're warriors and that they're fighting a war. But the problem with fighting a war is that you need an enemy. Warriors need an enemy. For you to be a warrior, you have to have an enemy. I cannot say that enough. And if they see themselves as warriors, then we, the public, are the enemy. And in my mind as a soldier, there's no way that I ever want to look at another American as my enemy, because the flag to me should always mean safety. It should always mean that we are one. We have a shared commonality. We are countrymen. We are kin. And when the chips come down, when the chips are down and we're in front of each other, we would stand together as countrymen rather than enemies. So this whole idea that cops are warriors in a war, or there's some thin blue line against chaos, that always gets me. Now, I may be an extremist. You may not agree with me, which you're welcome to say that you don't. I'm good with that. But when it comes to the idea of a thin blue line, especially the symbolism behind that thin blue line, I always tend to look at it as there's a thin blue line on a Black American flag. So to me, that looks like there's a thin blue line that separates Black America away from the whole. That's how I look at it. That's what it means
Can I
to
ask
me.
a quick question?
Yes, sir.
So there's, watching John Oliver over the past few weeks, you see that there's a specific police training that is going on apparently all over the country, where there's a guy, I forget what his name is, but the training, which apparently is being bought into by a lot of people, that police have to, constantly be prepared to kill something. Like he's teaching, you are a killing machine. Are you aware of the guy that I'm talking about?
Yeah, I'm aware. Well, I'm not aware of that guy you're talking about. I haven't seen that.
But
episode.
his methods.
Yes, but I'm aware of that mindset. It's called
Okay.
a warrior mindset.
Yes. Okay.
It's called a warrior mindset. It's they tried to indoctrinate special operations soldiers into that so-called warrior mindset, but
And was that rejected by the military?
the military thinks differently. Military has a completely different idea on everything, because we are actually fighting an enemy. The military, especially special operations, has a win or die mindset.
Are you aware of any police agencies locally that have bought into that particular type of training?
I can't say that they have. I can't say that they have, or that I know of. I would have to do more research on it to see which ones have and which ones haven't. And a lot of times you have to get somebody that's actually a part of those agencies to be honest. And that's you're depending on the individual integrity of people at that point.
All right.
Jason, I can answer your question maybe a little bit. One of the places where I, as a Navy base cop or somebody guarding the base, could shoot somebody with no questions asked was when they were around matters inherent to national security. Now, what that meant was, like, if you would go over to Bangor, and where they were loading nuclear weapons, and somebody was in there that shouldn't be there, legally, in theory, you could shoot them and kill them and get away with it.
Hey, Ryan?
Yes.
So to speak to that, when I was doing research for this topic, I ran across, I want to say, the Plowshare Group. They actually jumped the fence to the United States nuclear facility, were banging on nuclear missiles with a hammer, and they spread their blood on a nuclear missile, saying that basically nukes kill people. And not only were they not shot by the military police, they were taken into custody, and they were put on trial. They were brought to they were brought to the People's Justice. They weren't shot, they weren't harmed, but it's like a nun and I think a priest and a few other people.
That was Daniel Berrigan.
Yeah, but they didn't shoot him.
Right, but in theory, you're right. Now you're going exactly where I wanted to take this. Legally, in theory, they could have, but they didn't. Do you see what the difference is, Jason? So we had every right to do so and still didn't. And that's a hell of somebody banging on a nuclear weapon is a hell of a lot different than an officer saying, I thought he had a gun when he was pulling his wallet out. Can you see the differences in where we were, what standards we were held to in the military versus what the civilians are using? Are you still there, Jason?
Sure. Yeah, I'm here. No, I'm listening. I try to mute myself. I try to mute myself in between me talking. So then I got to find my unmute. But yeah, I totally get it.
So here is a case where the military is legally authorized to shoot people, and they didn't. And by the book, that should have been an open and shut case. Daniel Berrigan and the people on that weapon should have been shot dead, and there would have been no question. But of course, they didn't shoot. This is a hell of a lot different than Philando Castile or Amadou Diallo, or Justine Demond or Breonna Taylor. None of those people even were accused of crimes, and they're still dead. The military would have locked their ass up, would have locked the cops' ass up. No questions asked.
Just to be clear, just because I want to be 100% clear, even guilty people deserve due process under the law. And in my opinion, a cop's job is to bring people in front of the people's justice. And they are a trained professional. They are trained to handle people on their, it's like I told you the other day, they are trained to handle people on their very worst day. They are the trained professional. And they have all the faith of us as citizens that those people are going to do the right thing. So when they don't do the right thing, they take a shortcut and just shoot somebody. To me, that's a violation of the public trust. Because we gave you the training to go in there, handle that person, and bring them to a court of law to be judged by the people, ultimately, whether you're innocent or guilty. And you're a professional that's supposed to be able to do that without killing people. If we just wanted killers, we wouldn't give them any type of training on how to handle any of the situations that they find themselves in. We just give them a gun. Anybody can be, we can just have a goon squad. We could have a military unit that polices Seattle and just shoots people on sight. But we give them the training that they do because their job is to arrest people. And they're not doing that. They're just shooting people. So at that point, what difference are you in a hit squad? You know, what's the difference between you and a death squad? If you're just going to shoot a particular class of people with little to no reservation about it. I mean, shoot a 12-year-old boy in a park playing, which is the ideal place for a 12-year-old boy to play is a park.
And on that case, on the case of Tamir Rice, they pulled up right next to him. They pulled up within 15 feet of him and get out and shoot him within 2 seconds. Why did you pull up next to him? The Navy would have never done that. Never. You don't pull up, you literally don't pull up an arm's length away from the guy who's going to shoot you. That makes no tactical sense. That makes no, has no common sense. That would have never happened in the military stateside. I don't think that would have happened in a combat zone myself, not legally. But some of this is training, in my opinion. A lot of it is, we know that we're not going to get prosecuted. Look, there's a reason that the cops sat on George Floyd for 9 minutes while they were being filmed. Hell, I can't think of the guy's name. The lead guy sitting on his neck had his hand in his pocket. He's sitting there like he's waiting for a bus. He knew nobody was going to do anything to him. And they have no fear of anything being done to them. That's the difference between the military and the civilian police. The military put the fear of God that if you screwed up, you are going to prison. We will do something to you. Civilian police don't have that fear. And they
Well,
should.
even more than that, civilian police have an entire culture of this internal community protection. I mean, it's you know, my brother-in-law was a police officer for 13 years in Wisconsin, and you know, I say this often. He has told me that he could talk for days about the corruption on the force in various ways. You know, falsified reports, or you know, mishandling of evidence, or you know, even down to outright lying in order to make a conviction happen or get somebody prosecuted or whatever it might be. And he said, but also, even though you know all that stuff goes down, that you don't speak out because one, you're still trying to earn a paycheck for your family. You would be completely ostracized within your police force, like there's no protection for whistleblowers in the police force. And he told me, so you just deal with it. So this idea that, all cops are bad, is out there. It's not that individual cops are quote unquote bad, but there is no systemic way to hold bad cops accountable because the good cops know that they will get punished. And so basically, if good cops wanted to say anything, they would know that they are sacrificing their career, they're falling on their swords, and most of them simply won't make that decision because they are working class like the rest of us. I mean, it's not like cops get paid really a ton of money, and they've got their own families to provide from. So the whole system of community, city and county policing is it is geared towards allowing corruption to exist. I don't know what we do about that.
We're going to get to that because Riyadh and I talked about this. But look, both Riyadh and I agree that when it comes to police accountability and deadly force, we're having trouble describing what we think the changes should be. Nobody can be specific. The reason for this meeting tonight, outside of my campaign, is, and Jason, I specifically wanted you here because you have a lot bigger network than I do. I want you to take this back to your network. One of the things we need to do nationwide is adopt the military rules of escalation of force and use of deadly force and put the same accountability measures in with it. There is step one. And we'll get to some other steps here in a second. Does anybody have a problem with this? I mean, is this not clear enough after both Riyadh and I have explained it? Is there any issue here that anybody has a problem with? Riyadh, are we good?
Yeah, just playing devil's advocate, I would say, let's say when you say something, we should adopt the military's stance of the military's escalation of force model. That sounds scary. It sounds like we're adopting a military police. So can you break it down basically Barney style for the people that, because when you say military police standard, I know what you're talking about. Some people that have been in the military know what you're talking about, but break it down real quick as a solution, because there was a question that said proposed that they were asking about the proposed solutions.
We're getting to those in a second.
Break down that escalation of force model.
Well, here's how I would sum this up. The military use of force is far more strict on when you can shoot and when you can't versus today's civilian police model. The excuse of I was scared for my life is not good enough. Period. Why were you scared? You should have a damn good reason to be scared. And the military made it very clear. You being scared is not reason enough for you to shoot somebody. You need to be able to prove that your life was in danger.
And this is actually a really good point, because as we know, the I feared for my life excuse is not only widely used, it's almost promoted as a say this and that's how you're gonna skate on this one.
That's the difference between the two, Jason. The military made you prove your life was in danger. The civilian police rules do not. And if the military thought your life wasn't in danger, you were going to prison. The safety of the suspects, of civilian personnel, of dependents, that was all first in the military. The military didn't care if you got killed. Public safety came first in the military. In the civilian world, police safety comes first. There's your problem. Public safety should come first in the civilian world, just like the military. And yes, I will say it flat out. Police, your safety is secondary. You're a public servant. And to put this in perspective, if y'all want to look up the top 10 most dangerous jobs in America, police is not in it. And the vast majority of police officers are not shot. They are not stabbed. How are they killed? They are killed in traffic accidents. By the way, truck driver, number 5 to number 7 of most deadly jobs in America.
So Ryan, I've got a question for you. It came from the text string. They were asking, so what steps can the Washington legislature take to hold police more accountable for their actions?
I've got some right here, and all of you can be free to add to them. Riyadh, we discussed, I think, all of these.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we're going to start with body cams and dash cams. These should be required in all police vehicles, period. And tampering with them should be an instant felony charge tried by a special prosecutor, not the regular county prosecutor. This charge is not plea bargainable down. You either did it or you didn't. All charges against a suspect brought by a police officer that tampers with his body cam or his dash cam should be immediately dropped. And this is step one. We have this technology. This technology is also dash cams and inside cams, in truck cams, are widely used in the trucking industry. So this is something that is used every day, today, that police departments don't want to use. Also, when Sheriff Fortney became sheriff of Snohomish County, one of his first actions was to remove a system called telematics from the patrol cars. What is telematics? Well, while I am not 100% familiar with telematics, I am familiar with what it does because I use a similar system every day, and I am required to by federal law. Any commercial vehicle over 26,000 pounds in the United States today, other than the very few small exemptions like livestock haulers and the few guys who are running trucks older than 1999, are required to have an electronic log. And I have it sitting here. It's a program on my work cell phone. However, I don't have enough service here to log into my log. But what it does is you have a little box that hooks into the computer port on your car or on the truck. The phone hooks to that wirelessly, Bluetooth to that computer port. You're satellite tracked on every single movement you make. You cannot screw with it. It automatically tells you, you automatically go into driving over 5 miles an hour. And in some cases, you can even get put into driving in reverse if you're going over 5 miles an hour. It will tell you trouble codes. It will tell you location. It will tell you if you have your headlights on. It will tell you if you have your blinker on. It is the very first thing the police check when you get in a serious accident. And it's all on satellite. So even if I edit something, they check that against the satellite. So what what we should, if some police car is doing 80 in a 35 and runs over a nun walking her dog, the cop isn't going to beat that satellite. It's already there. This system already exists, and it's been in use for years in the trucking industry. This should be a requirement. How do we pay for it? How do we pay for the body cams? What we save in lawsuits will more than make up for this. Upside of all of these cams is you can file a public records request on them. So if you have an incident, you as a citizen can file a public records request on it and get the video. I see no downside to this. These things alone, these two things alone will do more for police accountability than almost anything else. I would like to end the military. I would like to end the program that gives military equipment to police forces. There is no reason for Snoqualmie to have an MRAP, and Snoqualmie has an MRAP. How do I know Snoqualmie has an MRAP? I delivered parts for the MRAP and set them in front of the MRAP. The more military equipment the police have, the more itchy they get to want to use it. They don't need it.
Hey, Ryan,
Yes, sir.
can you explain to them what an MRAP is? Because I know what it is, but some people may not know.
Why don't you explain? I know what it is. It's
An MRAP is a mine-resistant
I would call it a
armored
rubber
personnel.
tire tank without a gun.
It's a mine-resistant
Yes.
a military personnel carrier is what an MRAP is. It's a big four-wheeled vehicle with a 6.6 liter Duramax diesel motor, an Allison transmission. It sits up really high. It's a gigantic truck, basically, that's used to carry soldiers into combat. It's a light armored personnel carrier vehicle. It's got a V-shaped hull, and it's built to survive improvised explosive devices.
On the upside, most of those vehicles seem to never work for some reason. However, the expense of taking care of one of those vehicles, look, you can't go down to Napa and buy parts for an MRAP. So you have to buy them through military procurement. So if a bolt you need is $3 at Fastenal, it's going to be $300 through the military system. The amount of money we waste taking care of this equipment that we shouldn't have in the first place and do not need is staggering. I mean, this should be on cost alone. We shouldn't be doing this. They give you the vehicle so they can sell you the parts. That's the real game to this. No-knock warrants should be illegal. There is no reason for Breonna Taylor to be dead, except Breonna Taylor is not the only one. Breonna Taylor is one of many. And when you have somebody breaking into your house in the middle of the night, as a civilian, shooting back is going to be your first option. That's the first normal option. What do police expect us to do? We don't know who the hell you are. And when you're breaking in like that, you're going to get shot at. And you may get killed. You should have just knocked on the door. And you know what? If we lose some drug busts over it, big deal. Nobody lost their life. And flushing coke down the toilet is a way better alternative than having Breonna Taylor dead, or a 7-year-old girl in Detroit in 2010 who was sleeping on her couch who was killed by a no-knock warrant gunfight, or having a baby get its face blown off because the cops threw a flashbang grenade into a home through a window they broke and didn't look to see that they were throwing the flashbang grenade in the baby's crib with the baby. All of these things have happened. All of these things, none of these things needed to happen. I am against civil asset forfeiture in all its forms. For those of you who don't know what civil asset forfeiture is, a cop pulls you over, or just walks up to you on the street and says, "I think you committed a crime," and takes everything you have on you, including your vehicle. You do not have to be charged with a crime. Last year, the police, in 2018, the police seized more in civil asset forfeiture than the value of all reported stolen goods in America. In most cases of civil asset forfeiture, the people they're taking it from don't have the money to pay for the lawyers to fight to get their stuff back. So the police keep it and they auction it and they use that money to fund their department. That needs to end right now. I want to talk about cops shooting dogs. I am an LTL delivery driver. I have delivered to an absolute minimum of 20,000 different homes of all income levels, from Centralia up to the border, east to Moses Lake, Yakima, from next door to Bill Gates' house to places out in the sticks where I thought I was going to get shot for finding a random meth lab. Everything in between. In all of those cases, I have really only run into 5 horribly aggressive animals. I have been bitten. How many did I shoot? None. Absolutely none. A friend of mine who's an Army vet, he was in Kosovo. I wish he could be here tonight. He's a security guard. He works weekends. He has pit bulls. And he said, I am scared to death to call the cops for anything because I know if they show up, they'll shoot my dogs. At a minimum, they'll shoot my dogs. And this is a pretty easy thing to figure out. When somebody like me who comes to your house and you have a dog and I don't shoot it, and the cable guy doesn't shoot it, and the meter man doesn't shoot it, and the UPS guy doesn't shoot it, and the Amazon guy doesn't shoot it, and the fire department doesn't shoot it, but the cops are shooting your dogs, we have a cop problem. This should be an immediate termination, period. You are not in danger. You're making that shit up in your head. And until you get bit, and you better be bit a lot, you better not be shooting anybody's dogs. If the dog catcher can catch them without killing them, and they do, you don't need to be killing them either. I am free to have anybody add anything to this that they would like. These are the things Riyadh and I came up with. Riyadh, feel free to add if you need to. The one thing I did not say about telematics is I would not just extend that to police cars. I would extend that to all municipally owned vehicles, including school buses, because my wife and I run the largest parent group in Arlington. There have been accusations about bus drivers intentionally jumping on brakes to throw kids down. Telematics will tell you that. That is one of the primary things telematics looks for, is hard brakes. And who's really looking for that more than telematics? Your insurance companies. They want to see your hard brakes. If any of you have the little Geico things or the Progressive things that you plug into your ALDL port on your vehicle in order to get a discount on your insurance, they're looking for hard brakes, period. These systems exist. There's no reason not to require them. And the only reason they aren't required is because police know they can't screw with them. So anybody, if you want to add to this, please do. If not, open lines. We can turn the recording off and go from there. I yield the floor.
Ryan, I just wanted to announce that I posted in the chat what's called a road to abolition. I think people have the wrong idea about abolition. when people talk about police abolition and defund the police, they're not talking about eliminating armed policing, but really talking about redirecting resources and making sure that if there is going to be an armed response to anything, that it should be only in very specific situations, and that in many situations we don't need an armed response, and that there shouldn't be an armed response. And also a whole slew of other things about systemic racism in the police forces, and how to address those. Anyway, so I just put that website in the chat. It's called 10forjustice.com. I endorsed that as a candidate, and there are things that you talked about tonight that are a part of that. But it's a very comprehensive plan for justice reform, rethinking how we do policing. But I really like the accountability measures that you have brought to the table, as far as, you know, if our military is going to be held to this standard of accountability, then we should hold those same standards for our local police, regardless of other reforms.
Well, I in some ways we go too far in the weeds on this issue, in my opinion. If every truck driver in America can be required to use a telematics type system, so can the police. And truck drivers, when did this come into? I think this was required in 2013 federally. There's no reason for the police not to use it. How they get around that is the systems I'm required to use as a truck driver are required for commercial vehicles. Police departments, bus drivers, municipal snowplows, those are non for hire, so they're exempt. We can change, that's something that can be changed on a state level. My grandma was an LPN at a home, I grew up in Illinois, it doesn't matter, at a home for mentally and physically disabled adults. She worked there for 35 years. And a lot of them beat the hell out of her, and they broke her knee, and they tore her shoulder apart. She didn't kill any of them. Bar bouncers deal with lots of fights, lots of violent people. They're not killing anybody. Every day, we have people in society who deal with 99.9% of what law enforcement does. The only people killing people are law enforcement. And we also have to realize that in many cases, a lot of the people being killed are not even suspected of a crime. Philando Castile was not killed for, he did nothing illegal. Breonna Taylor did nothing illegal. The 7-year-old girl laying on her couch who was shot and killed in Detroit did nothing illegal. So it's not that everybody is committing crimes. When I said at the beginning of this, there is nothing that anybody can do to, if they're trying to film a cop, if the cop says, I thought he had a gun, and they shoot and kill you or shoot and disable you, there's nothing any of us can do to prevent that. The standard is bad. The standard is wrong. The standard needs to be changed. I yield the floor again. Ask away, everybody.
I've got two things I'd like to add. My biggest complaint with the abolish police or defund police movement is the overall terminology. Because when you say abolish the police or defund the police, that immediately puts an idea in somebody's mind. And I've read over what they're talking about. They've got some really good ideas. Moving more money towards stuff like social workers, sending in the correct professional in the correct situation, stuff like that. But I'll be damned if they don't have the worst terminology ever attached to it.
You know what? And honestly, Riyadh, it has been brought. You know, it's been brought up exactly that before, you know, I think the best thing we can do is to have conversations about it and say this is what it really means. But it's hard. Yeah, I mean, language is always a difficulty in making sure that you're framing those things in a way that people are going to be immediately receptive to what you're talking about versus immediately dismissive. So I don't know that people got it right on this one, but I don't know that those things were going to get solved right away anyway. And the the ideas on the table and being under discussion is certainly important.
Look, we can change abolish police to accountable police. I mean, it might even be just that simple. I cannot think of any person who would be against body cams, any rational person. Especially when I explain to them, hey, if they do something wrong to you, you can file a public records request on that. And you can show it to all your friends. And you can post it on social media. I want to see police do the dance that military rules of deadly force are too strict to use in America. I want to see that rationale. I want that rationale exposed. Because once it's exposed, it'll get changed.
You're never going to get that exposed. You're never going to get them to say that. I mean, it's true. They do believe it's too strict. An MP has more rules and regulations on him than a civilian cop. Everybody knows it, but you're never going to get them to admit that, because then they would look foolish. It would look like we're giving our enemies more quarter than we're giving an American citizen who's supposed to have more rights and respect attached to him.
Then fine. If they won't fight it, then we can pass it. One way or the other, we've got them in a box if we can get this out enough.
Getting it out involves good messaging, and the message is good. I've talked the message to people that I know are very, very, very much right-wing types, and just from me being, and maybe it's because I'm a black person and I'm the only black face that a lot of these people interact with on an everyday basis. I mean, I'm fully aware that I'm the only black person a lot of people see all day. And I've been talking it. I've been, when I was in the military, our use of force and our trigger discipline was way more strict than the police. And that's a pretty receptive message. People generally tend to understand that. And instead of and the other issue that I would have is, I get that we're saying the military, but the truth is it's not just the military. It's our sons and daughters. It's the guy down the street. It's the guy in the National Guard 2 houses down that's a weekend soldier. I mean, it's not some faceless blob of people. These are people who we know, people that we are related to, people that we care about. They are expected to have enough discipline to toe the line and restrain themselves. Otherwise, they bring dishonor on the United States. And
go ahead, Riyadh. My bad.
No. And part of me is just trying to figure out why we can't get the people that are tasked with upholding the law to do the same.
I know the answer. I know that answer. It's because there's no accountability. And the accountability that we're trying to bring in this discussion solves 90% of the problems we're trying to address. That's the point of the accountability. Riyadh, when you and I say we could not have acted like this in the military or we would have ended up in prison, we knew we would be held accountable. Therefore, we were more disciplined. Look, as a truck driver, I don't get to blast every car that cuts me off or everybody who puts my life in danger on a daily basis. That's not an excuse. I go to prison. And everybody gets that as a truck driver, right? Nobody, I don't know of anybody saying, outside of other truck drivers who just want to do it but never do, that, man, that truck should be able to blast that car that cut him off and kill that guy. Well, I can't do that as a truck driver. That person absolutely put my life in danger. There's a reason being a truck driver is far more deadly than being a police officer. It's because of shit like that. Now,
So Ryan,
yes,
Ryan,
sir.
just to play devil's advocate here, say I'm police chief, I don't know, what's his name? I step in here, I've heard your pitch, and my key complaint is this. If you look at our paperwork and if you look at our doctrine, we're already doing that.
Well, you are not.
On paper, their doctrine
You are
says
not.
that they have accountability, and on paper, their doctrine says that they have oversight. On paper, their doctrine says that they have discipline and that they are there to protect and serve.
Then tell me
if
why
you-
Philando Castile's dead. Tell me why
Yeah.
Amadou Diallo is dead.
Hey,
Well,
Ryan.
the first,
Yes.
Sorry to interject here. So Carol Sullivan's been patiently waiting to talk. She also had a question in chat.
I'm looking. Go ahead, Carol.
Okay, thanks. I'm backing up just a little bit to what Riyadh was saying about the language used and when they're saying defund the police. As a PCO for a precinct in Mount Vernon, a couple weeks ago, I wrote over 100 cards to some of my members of the precinct, and I handwritten cards. I got one of them back, not my card, but I got a response. And I'd like to read this because I think you'll understand. I'm just asking them to get out and be a voter. Postmark matters. And by the way, could you just vote Democrat up and down the ballot? So here's what this lady says. Hello, I am a voter. And this year I will definitely be voting Republican up and down the ballot. I'll be dropping it off at the police station right before I thank them for their service. Now I know exactly what she's referring to. And that slogan, which is, I wrote back to her and I said, please don't, I'm glad you're a voter. Please don't mistake a rally slogan for a campaign promise. But if you've seen any of the ads and you see that they're using that very effectively in advertising, somehow we have to change the messaging. And that's a national thing, not a statewide, but we have to change the messaging on that. And boy, somebody better come up with a much better slogan. Riyadh, I think you'd agree. So anyway, this was my 2 cents worth.
Thanks for sharing that, Carol.
Thanks.
Carol, I agree with you too. And this was the point of the, and look, I will write all this stuff down and put it up on my Facebook page and my website. As I'll ask you, was there anything in it tonight that you found offensive or found the messaging wrong, or weren't able to understand any of it?
Oh, you're muted there.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm asking you.
If there was any messaging wrong in my message or her.
No. In what we have said tonight.
Oh, no, I really would love to have you somehow, if you could ever possibly work it. Come to Coffee and Cards on a Monday morning. I know you said you work and that's right. Maybe Joy would come and just, or Riyadh, I don't know. But I think people need to hear this difference between the military and the police. And I think that's a real important message. And I like the way you're very strong on that. And I appreciate the opportunity to hear that distinction because I didn't know it, not having any military experience or family members with that experience, except my dad, who's, that's a long time ago. Okay, so thank you for that. I really appreciate it, both of you.
Look, why did my screen just go dark?
Your camera is off right now, Ryan.
I know, because I'm reading the chat.
She has a question there. I don't know if you want to back up to that too about federal troops and.
Oh, about that one. Yeah, would you have some thoughts on what the federal troops versus the protesters in Portland? I mean, that scares me. And I don't know if anybody else feels the same way, but I have family living in Portland and near Portland, and I grew up near Portland, and it just seems very close to home. And I just wondering if it isn't a portend of what might be happening or what might happen in November. I mean, I just almost feel like it's staging for, I don't want to leave, even though I've been voted out of office, sort of thing. I don't know. Maybe
I was down at the Portland protests, and I've been at the Seattle protests when they were happening a couple of well, was that month or two ago now? Early June, late May, early June. I was in Seattle a few times, and then a couple of weeks ago, I ran some supplies down to the protesters in Portland because I support them. You know, one, I support the protests in general. I think that they're asking for police accountability. But you know, I have heard a number of places that what happened in Portland, and as far as I know, the feds have moved out of there now and actually have come up to Seattle. But are they still there?
They are still there, but they're hiding.
Okay, so they haven't been engaging with the protests for I would say a week and a half now. But I think you're right, Carol. I think that I don't know if it is anything necessarily to do with Trump leaving office, but I think in general, a testing of public will, and not just right there in Portland, how is the local community going to respond to federal troops being there? And as you can see, the Portland moms got out there, and you know, I was witness to that, and it was, you know, it was pretty incredible the amount of solidarity that there was there. You know, and down there in Portland, there's so much tear gas just lying around on the ground that when the wind kicks up, it gets in your eyes. So they've done a ton of environmental damage in and around that federal building, but a test of how is the nation going to respond, not just so I think you're right. I think there is an amount of, you know, how far can we push our population with this authoritarian response to, you know, what I certainly see as people's constitutional rights to protest. And you know, I think what it I'm concerned about November also. You know, I'm concerned that should Trump lose the election legitimately, that he's not going to want to leave power. And so I think it's really up to these federal troops as citizens themselves to, and I think some of them have recognized that they don't want to engage in this way anymore, that engaging in this way was not the purpose. It's not part of their mission. So I don't know. I think Portland was a test case, and I think we have to watch things very closely moving forward, because I know that the federal troops have come back up to Seattle as well. So, you know, it's worrisome. It's really worrisome.
I took a different line on this. Especially having my conspiracy theorist buddies. It has never made any sense to me to only be afraid of the feds. And I don't know if you've read about the Chicago torture chambers or what's going on in Compton or in LA, or the Watts tax in Chicago. If your local police want to disappear you, they'll disappear you. And the fact that they were federal, in my opinion, while it's disheartening to me, it didn't change the system. Other than there's, you know, the feds are supposed to be the biggest and the baddest. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. The problem still exists. Look, if your local cops grab you off the street and throw you in a rental van, just like the video of that happening in NYC, you're just as screwed from a city cop or a state cop as you are a fed. And those are the problems that need to be addressed. And I don't think they will get addressed federally until they get addressed locally. And that's my, look.
Well, what,
Should
you
be
know,
addressed.
once
Mark?
the feds backed off in Portland, you actually saw the local police in Portland be just as aggressive as the feds were. Almost as if the feds, the behavior of the federal troops gave the local troops a green light to behave the same way.
You could make that case. But I think we worry too much about the feds and not the local is what I'm saying. I think we need to worry about the local as well. Look, the feds went down there to escalate. They escalated. It didn't do, I don't think it did anybody any favors. But what the feds found out is that the people weren't going to leave. So did we win? Did we lose? I don't know. But to me, it has never made any sense to just worry about the feds. I saw part of
Address it
that.
though.
Can you read that to me, honey?
How would you address it? You said it needs to be addressed, but
How would I address? I would address it with the same police accountability measures that we've already talked about in this conversation.
Hey, Ryan,
Yes, sir.
I was looking at the chat and Josh Capazio, I'm saying that wrong, I'm sorry. He said that's why Antifa was declared a terrorist organization. The protests that they can arrest can now be treated and charged as terrorists. Terrorists have far less rights than normal citizens. And to me, that makes that's a stark truth, because once you declare an American a terrorist, you can use the entire governmental apparatus to basically treat them like people they pick up and stick in Guantanamo Bay. You're basically using that as an end around their constitutional rights, and you can use things like the Patriot Act and all these other crazy laws that we've passed that treat an American citizen not as an American citizen, but as some sort of outside agitator.
I
Which-
agree.
That's
I
a
agree.
great point that he made.
I agree with that fear, but my only fear is that can come through your local police too.
Oh, of course.
So-
I always tell people that they were like, well, you know, your Second Amendment is to protect yourself from the government. I said, dude, I'm black. They could
That's
shoot
bullshit.
me in the middle. They could shoot me in the middle of Broadway in front of 200 people, and all the cop has to say is, I thought he had a gun.
Agreed.
So,
But look, if
Carol-
the Second Amendment was to protect you from the government, there would be laws that it would have said that, and they would have been passed a long time ago, that said it is legal for you to shoot a government official.
Yeah.
Those
Carol
laws
is indicating her need to go, and I'm gonna second that for myself. I've got to get out of here. This has been a good conversation. I really like the perspective. Ryan, I want to talk to you more about how we could codify what we would need to get done at the state level, or even you know, more nationally at the federal level, to try and get those same standards of accountability. But when are you going to do this again?
When are we going to do this again, Joy? 2 weeks?
that's what we talked about.
All right.
All right.
every 2 weeks. So,
Chances
look,
are I'm not making it through. I mean, realistically, for my congressional run, we're about 1% behind right now, but that's still 2,100 votes. And even though there's a lot of votes yet to be counted, we're looking at probably outside chance for us to make it through, although a recount may be triggered. And I say that because on Monday my time may be a lot more free to be able to engage more on this. But totally appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
all right, I'll call you tomorrow, Jason.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Michael, are you still here? Did he leave?
No, I'm here.
All right.
Don't got my
Um,
video on though, but yeah.
All right, don't leave. Don't leave yet. So, Riyadh, I agree with your fear. Again, that can come through local cops. In a lot of ways, I just think we're looking at too big of a picture and not the little stuff that that really should enforce change. And things like body cams, things like telematics, things like dash cams, things like using the military rules of force, those would really increase change. And I can't think of anything. I can't, a civilian can't say, hey, we should use the military rules of force, because they don't know what they are. And I'm open to anybody's ideas, man. If you want to add to this list, add a leg. If you've got better ideas, fine, I'll take them. But accountability is what we really need. More than defunding, more than anything else. I agree with doing away with police jobs and having more social workers and more hospital beds and more drug treatment. We've tried it the police only way. It hasn't worked. It's time to try something new.
So, Ryan, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
What would you think of an independent oversight board for police to take the accountability and investigation of police-involved shooting out of the hands of police officers?
I'm behind that 100%. The question is, where would that expertise come from? The Navy had CID. I don't know what the Army's name for that was.
It's CID, same thing.
For the rest of you guys, that's Criminal Investigation Division. That's NCIS. Those guys were not on your side, ever. And in a lot of cases, they shouldn't be. And I don't think that any civilian review board should automatically be sympathetic to the police. And I do. That's the one problem I see with it. If the police know that their civilian review boards are not going to be sympathetic to them, they are going to be more accountable. If they know the civilian review boards are going to rubber stamp everything they do, then nothing's going to change. And we're back right to square one, man. Does anybody else have any questions? Because I would love Michael to talk if he would like to talk.
Yeah. So I've just been listening. I wasn't really expecting to talk, but I mean, it sounds like there's a lot, that we could learn in regards to trying to figure out if we can see more of the military use of force policy. But I mean, you have some great framework that's there, and I think that really it comes down to just the accountability piece of we have to change the expectation of law enforcement and what they view as being accountable for deciding to use force to take someone's life. And I think that also on the secondary level of that is the escalation of force. I think that if we can focus in on what are the steps that are being taken prior to the use of force and making sure that people are held accountable just when they use excessive force, then the thought of actually taking a life would weigh more heavily on those officers as well in that time. So I don't really know how to kind of tackle that thought process. Is that on the state level first, or should that be the county level first? I still don't know what exactly is the best route to go, bottom up or top down, but I know that we definitely have the platform and the discussions going now. So we should be able, I'm thinking, hopefully in the next 6 months to a year, hopefully we can have way more information through public disclosure and through weeding out the people who are willing to have these conversations versus those who are not. So I think we have to kind of start there too, is just to see where we can go and who's willing to have these conversations.
You were a prison guard for 10 years. What were your rules of force?
So deadly force, like, that was pretty much, if if a inmate who wasn't minimum custody, anything above minimum custody, if they hit the perimeter, and we had like a 10-foot rule on the perimeter fence. If they breach the fence or the barrier, then you could use deadly force. But there's only been a couple uses of that, people being shot. I think they had a couple cases in the Walla Walla about 15 years ago. I think Clallam Bay, there was an inmate who tried to escape by crashing a forklift through the wall. They used deadly force there. But not too much. It wasn't too big of a thing as far as in the correctional system. But I think when it came down to just the use of force for, fights and staff assaults, there was a lot of discrepancy there as far as how policy was interpreted. And there was also the, unspoken hint of, hey, before we discuss use of force, we're going to bring a use of force instructor to talk with you all about how to write your reports. And prior to going in on a cell entry, we're going to, we talked about the game plan, and we would rehearse our discussion of what we did prior to filming our debrief. And so there's a lot of planning on the side where I felt as though it was more of like the CYA, we don't want to look bad, so we're going to try and guide you on what you say. If someone applied some, if you say someone's like, we are, I reached around the inmate's face and, ended up applying a chokehold, they would like, no, you guided his face away from your body and ended up with your arm across his face. Like, it was those kind of things where, when you saw those things happen, you were just like, oh yeah, this isn't what I want to be a part of. So, but I think that, and a lot of it is just because my personal feeling too is also like an oversight committee with civilians to give that non-law enforcement perspective, because a lot of times you get that, hey, we have to protect each other, because every single person that's reviewing these use of force and making sure that things are okay, all of them have a job and they all have an agenda of, I want to keep my job or I want to move forward to the next level. So if we work together, no one gets in trouble, we all look good. And when someone gets in trouble, we get rid of the person who got in trouble and everyone else can advance to the next level.
Can I ask you a question?
Huh?
Were all of your incident reports signed under penalty of perjury?
No, not technically, no, I don't think so.
That is something I have seen in every traffic ticket I've gotten, every police report I've ever read. All of the statements written by the officer are signed under penalty of perjury.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what, and look, the law assumes police are expert witnesses in every case.
Mm-hmm.
Even when it has been proven to lie, you're still, as the accused, have to prove your way out of it. That's the real way the legal system works.
Exactly.
We need to somehow start getting perjury charges filed. And when I said that body cam tampering and dash cam tampering should be tried by a special prosecutor, that is what I was trying to avoid. Because we all know that the county prosecutor across the country are not prosecuting cops for perjury when it's proven that they perjured in the report. Somehow we need to change that. That's a little, I don't know how to do that other than say, hey, this is a problem, this needs to be discussed. But if a police officer writes up a false report on you for whatever charge they made up, you either plead out because that's all you can afford to do, or you spend tens of thousands of dollars proving yourself not guilty, which you weren't in the first place.
Yeah,
Something that needs to be changed.
totally. And you know, I think like the other piece of which I think is more of a long-term change after I think addressing the use of force is something that needs to be priority, but I also think that the hiring standards need to be revisited and the hiring process. I think that the polygraph should also include questions to discover racial bias and prejudice. And, you know, it shouldn't be a reason to exclude someone, but I think that in conjunction with that being discovered, you have to have, you know, continual anti-racism training that needs to happen. And there needs to be historical training that happens that's based on the demographics served by the community for the officers. You know, if you are unfamiliar with the culture that you are dealing with, there's going to be a misinterpretation. There's room for error that's solely based on you know, ignorance that comes on behalf of the officer on how to deal with you know, a different culture, the type of tone that's used, the type of words, the phrases that may be misunderstood. You know, even for me working in law enforcement and in the healthcare industry, you know, there are times where there's been a misunderstanding with especially Asian and American Pacific Islander culture on just how to talk with them on compliance and body language and being in personal space. And so there's certain things like that where I feel like there's times where officers in law enforcement, like when people don't initially comply or when they use their verbal skills and they're not immediately complied with, they resort to escalation, where sometimes it's thinking about how they're delivering the message and being aware of how am I being understood? Am I sending out what I want to be done the right way? Does this person even know what I'm asking them to do?
You know, this was, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, happened in Utah, and this is a white officer and a white victim. Supposedly there was a call at this convenience store of somebody with a gun, and this kid walks out with his hands in his pockets. He doesn't even see the cop. He's got earbuds in. He doesn't. Cop tells him to get his hands out of his pockets. The kid never even heard the cop, and the cop shoots and kills him.
Oh
wow. And I've seen the video. It was, the cop had a body cam on, and it was ruled justified. And you know, I'm sure this is just some average Utah kid. He had a hoodie on. He wasn't. I mean, he was just walking out of the store and didn't see the cop. Didn't see anything. He was just in his own little world, listening to his iPod. He's dead. No weapons were found on the kid. He wasn't doing anything but listening to his iPod. Why was there's no reason for the kid to be shot? None.
Yeah.
Anything. It shows that none of us have a chance against this system. And that has to change. You know, and look, this is Arlington, this is Granite Falls. This is not Compton or Chicago or New York or, of all places, Albuquerque. My God, that place, they really execute people there. If I read a lot of mob history, I'm good up to about John Gotti, and one thing that comes through in all the history I've read is they all own the cops. They all paid them off. Nobody has ever drawn a straight line between crime rates and the corruption of city police. I wish somebody would do that study. I don't know exactly how it would be done. But if society isn't going to trust the police, and the police are obviously against society, all it does is breed more crime. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The cops clamp down more because there's more crime, but there's more crime because nobody trusts the cops. And nobody will report anything. How do we get out of that cycle? And I don't think we can get out of that cycle without accountability.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, I definitely agree. Accountability is very important. That's kind of where I'm at with it, is just you know, transparency. We need more transparency. We need that data. We need data to be reported to the FBI. I saw an article that like only 40% of agencies actually report statistics on racial complaints to the FBI for data keeping. And even in Washington State, I can't remember specifically the language of the law, but it basically was like, you have the option to report the stats or not, and a lot of agencies just don't even keep track of the stats.
Right.
So we've got to work on that part of it, as far as just, hey, like, we got to start collecting data. We got to start making that data available to the public, whether we put it out on an annual basis or a quarterly basis, whatever the case may be. But we deserve to know how things are trending. And, you know, the accountability of officers, you know, is about keeping us safe, but also that trust of the community. We should know that we should be able to call them. You know, it's kind of like the incident where when I was in Shoreline and doing the chalk art on Thursday with my daughter, and someone drove through and almost hit a kid, and he gets out of his car, he has his pistol out and tells people if they step on his property, he's going to shoot. And people did call the Shoreline PD, and one person was hung up on, and she actually called 3 times before she actually got to talk to someone and file a complaint, and no one showed up. She lived in the neighborhood. She actually posted, said it was 9 hours, you know, 9 hours later, no one had ever showed up. And, you know, things like that, where how does the community feel protected if something happens like that and no one shows up to see what's going on, especially in the climate that we're in, where there is racial tension with protests and misunderstandings. That should be a priority response.
hey, Michael, can you tell everybody what you do? Can you tell everybody about your group?
Oh man, so I am a new activist in the realm of social justice and racial inequality. I started a group in Granite Falls, Change the Narrative, Granite Falls, to have discussions on the issues at hand, currently with inequality and racism for people of color, not just Black, but all people of color, and also just to discuss the history of injustice in America. You know, my personal focus is to try to work within the school system to get curriculum change, to start diversity committees, to make sure that discrimination and racism is included in the triangle of no tolerance with sexual harassment and bullying. So I think that anti-racism, anti-bullying, anti-sexual harassment all should be in a triangle together to be addressed through policies and education. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do.
And to everybody else here, Michael has a historical knowledge that is rivaled by very few people I have ever met. He's one of the most impressive people I have ever met, and he's good. And if you guys should contact him outside of this meeting, you all will be impressed. Joy and Jess and I went to his Change the Narrative sign waving in Granite Falls last night. Michael, do you want to start the story? Because I kind of ended up finishing it. But you should, I didn't talk to the second guy. That was all you. I will say this about you, Michael. You have far more patience than I do.
Hey, Ryan,
Yes, ma'am.
before you move and talk about last night, Jody had a question in chat. How do you think we get the police unions on board with reform?
We don't. We take it from them. That's how.
And what do you mean by that? I mean,
We can set the rule. We can set the statewide laws.
it's still a
And
bargaining entity to have to negotiate with, right?
I don't know exactly how this works. Look, telematics was not done away with by Adam Fortney because of the police contract. That was done away with Adam Fortney because he didn't want his deputies getting caught doing something stupid. Tacoma is assigning their cops body cams next month. I don't think that was bargained. I do know that in trucking, the in-cams, the inside cab cams have to be bargained for union personnel. Outside of non-union personnel, they just put them in there and say you're stuck with it. But telematics is absolutely a state law that we could make. Body cams is most likely a state law that we could make. Changing our state's rules of deadly force is a change that it would be done at a state level, not at a local, not through collective bargaining. So, and by the way, Jody, you can just ask the questions. We know who you are. Continue on, Michael, I guess? Or Jody, are we good?
Hold on a second. So we're still recording. Did you want to continue to record, or are we ready to turn it off?
I think we could turn it off. We'll just cut out the last 10 minutes of this conversation. We'll cut out from when Michael started talking, and we'll post it.
Go ahead and stop recording.
Michael, do you want your stuff in there? We can leave your stuff in there.
Yeah, you can leave that in there. That's fine.
I'm gonna go ahead and stop now, just so everyone can feel more comfortable asking questions. Okay, I'm gonna stop now.